They say you only truly know someone when they're forced to show their heart. The day Sarah Cunningham woke up in a pristine hospital room, tubes attached to her every limb. She realized there was only one way to know if her millionaire husband truly loved her. The doctors whispered about her fragile state, yet Sarah alone knew the coma was a ruse. What would her husband, a man named James Cunningham, do when he believed she was completely unaware? Would he remain the loving partner she'd thought him to be, or reveal a darker side that would shatter her world forever? Sarah Cunningham was born in a humble neighborhood on the outskirts of Buffalo, New York, to a small family of teachers. Her parents, Margaret and Philip Harrington, had instilled in her the values of hard work, honesty, and compassion. She often reminisced about the nights she and her brother David spent watching their parents grade papers by the dim light of a single desk lamp. They never had a lot, but there was always a sense of shared warmth, love, and an unbreakable bond. James Cunningham, on the other hand, came from the famed Cunningham family, a lineage with roots deep in Manhattan's upper echelons. Wealth and influence practically flowed through his veins. If you walked down Fifth Avenue and asked about the Cunninghams, you would hear tales of their ventures in real estate, technology, and philanthropic foundations. James himself had inherited a genius for business, and at 33 was already heading one of his family's largest property development firms, Cunningham & Co., which oversaw lavish projects in Dubai, London, and across the United States. Their lives collided during a charity gala at the Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, in Manhattan. A swanky event designed to raise funds for children's education. Sarah attended in support of her parents, who had been honored for their lifelong dedication to teaching. James was there as a major donor, providing a 7-figure check to the organization. In a sea of glittering chandeliers and suits from Tom Ford, her modest floor-length navy gown caught his eye. There was something unassuming yet radiant about her, a stark contrast to the jaded socialites he was used to. He had walked over to her with a sense of calm confidence, extended his hand, and introduced himself. Sarah, initially taken aback, quickly gathered her composure. She wasn't one to fawn over money or status, which made James even more intrigued. Over glasses of champagne and hors d'oeuvres from world-renowned chef Thomas Keller, they talked for hours. Their chemistry was undeniable. That night, as Sarah made her way back home on a crowded late-night train, she couldn't stop replaying their conversation in her mind. James, for all his wealth, seemed humble, empathetic, and genuine. He shared anecdotes about his family's philanthropic endeavors, about his grandmother who still volunteered at a local homeless shelter, and even about how he intended to expand his real estate empire responsibly, ensuring he gave back to local communities. She found herself smiling involuntarily. It felt like she'd discovered a rare gem in a city filled with polished stones. James, too, was enamored. Sarah's warmth and authenticity made him feel alive in a way that his usual circle of acquaintances couldn't. He sent her a bouquet of white lilies and pink roses the next day, with a handwritten note. "I'd be honored if you'd have dinner with me this weekend." Within months, they were an established couple, seen at society dinners and philanthropic events hand in hand. The press adored them, the charming heir to an empire, and she, the down-to-earth teacher's daughter who had captured his heart. Their relationship was a testament to two worlds blending seamlessly, old money with new values, high society glamour with a grounded perspective on life. Still as close as they were, Sarah often grappled with insecurities. She worried that beneath James's shining veneer, there might be a side of him shaped by privilege that she couldn't understand. Small things would trigger her doubts. A careless remark about lower-income neighborhoods, or a joke about the cost of living that others found humorous, but left her unsettled. But James always seemed contrite when he realized she was uncomfortable and would assure her that he admired her background and her empathy. He was learning to see the world through her eyes, he said. In time, they married in a ceremony fit for a fairy tale, a gorgeous weekend in the Hamptons, officiated by a family friend with the ocean as their witness. But life is never as simple as the fairy tales. Within a year of marriage, Sarah found herself pregnant. She was euphoric, imagining the baby's sweet cries echoing in the expansive hallways of their penthouse in Tribeca. James was equally ecstatic, boasting to his colleagues that he was going to raise the next great Cunningham, or maybe if it was a girl, the next philanthropic genius. Yet something lingered in Sarah's heart, an unshakable need for reassurance. While she loved her husband, the subtle pangs of fear grew more pronounced as her belly swelled. She needed to know beyond the philanthropic dinners and public generosity whether James was truly ready to be a father and a devoted partner in every sense. His life had been so entwined with power and money. Could he prioritize family over the relentless pursuit of wealth? Sarah's pregnancy was declared high risk due to certain medical complications. Dr. Anthony Rosen, her obstetrician at Mount Sinai Hospital, meticulously tracked her condition. She developed preeclampsia, high blood pressure, that threatened both her life and her unborn child's. Dr. Rosen insisted on regular checkups, bed rest, and round-the-clock monitoring. James, for his part, insisted on hiring the best nursing staff money could buy. Their lavish penthouse transformed into a miniature medical facility with advanced equipment, on-site nurses, and a private ambulance on standby. But in the midst of all these expensive measures, Sarah felt an odd absence. James was still present. Physically, he came home every night, kissed her forehead, asked perfunctory questions about her health. Yet she noticed his mind seemed perpetually occupied with work. His phone was always buzzing. She would catch him scrolling through emails while she tried to talk about the baby's progress. Board meetings, property launches, investor dinners. He seemed to juggle them all seamlessly, but his attention on her felt divided. One night, when she had difficulty sleeping, Sarah found him in his study at 2 a.m. He was on a conference call with a client from Dubai, the city lights reflecting against the sleek glass of their windows. He ended the call the moment he saw her concerned she was unwell. She felt tears form in her eyes, telling him how alone she felt, how terrified she was about her health and the baby's. James enveloped her in his arms, promising to be there to support her no matter what. Yet as she left the room, his phone rang again, and he glanced at it with the same longing he once reserved for her. She couldn't help but feel replaced by business demands. During this period, Sarah's mother, Margaret, visited often. Margaret was quick to notice Sarah's anxiety. "Honey," she said, "James is a good man, but he's under a lot of pressure. The Cunningham name is a huge responsibility." Sarah listened intently, but couldn't dispel the image of her sleepless nights in the penthouse, while her husband was thousands of miles away, mentally engaged in business deals. It was during one such restless night, while reading an article online about unwavering commitments, that an absurd plan formulated in her mind. What if she tested James's devotion in the most extreme way possible? Was there a chance that if she put herself in a life-or-death scenario, she'd finally see his true colors? The thought frightened her, but it also gripped her. She recalled a dramatic story someone had told at a dinner party about a woman who pretended to be grievously ill to see if her partner truly cared. Could that work for her? As her pregnancy advanced and the risk to her health increased, The stage was almost set for a scenario that no one would question. If she fell ill, deeply ill, how would James respond? Would he step away from everything to be by her side, or would he hire more staff and continue gallivanting across the globe for business? She kept these thoughts hidden, locked in the most secret part of her soul. It felt sinful to even consider orchestrating a scenario that manipulative, but the alternative, living with unanswered doubts, seemed worse. She justified it to herself as a final test before the baby arrived. If James failed her, she'd need to make some difficult decisions about the future. If he passed, she could welcome the child without the burden of constant fear and suspicion. Months passed, and Sarah's due date loomed just 8 weeks away. Tension in the Cunningham household was palpable. Doctors were worried about her increasing blood pressure, and James was frequently called away for critical business matters. One afternoon, Sarah was alone in the penthouse, standing by the window, when a wave of pain shot across her body. Startled, she staggered to the couch, her heartbeat thrumming in her ears. Was this labor? Was the baby in trouble? She reached for her phone to call Dr. Rosen, but the pain worsened and she dropped the device. The next thing she remembered was waking up in a room with antiseptic smells, bright fluorescent lights, and the low hum of medical machines. Her vision was blurry, and she felt a dull throbbing in her arm, where an IV was inserted. As the world came into focus, she saw her mother and father perched on chairs near her bed, their eyes red from crying. James was nowhere in sight. Alarmed, she tried to speak, but her throat was dry and only a croak emerged. Margaret noticed and rushed over, placing a gentle hand on Sarah's forehead. "You're at Mount Sinai Hospital, sweetheart," Margaret explained softly. "You collapsed. The doctors said it was your blood pressure." Sarah tried to sit up, anxiety buzzing in her chest. "Where's James?" she managed to whisper. Margaret exchanged a glance with Philip, then reluctantly explained. "He was here earlier, but he stepped out for a meeting." At first, Sarah felt a sharp pang of disappointment, but then her mind seized the opportunity. This is it, the chance to see if he'd truly be there for me. She pressed her head back into the pillow, eyes welling with tears that stung with betrayal, but also a grim resolve. Perhaps the time had come to put her plan into action. After a thorough examination, Dr. Rosen concluded the situation was dire enough to keep Sarah under constant observation. She was advised complete bed rest until the baby's birth. The next day, James arrived in a flurry, apologizing for his absence, claiming it had been an unavoidable emergency meeting about a multi-million-dollar deal. He showered Sarah with roses, a new diamond-studded necklace, and a promise to never leave her side again. Deep in her heart, Sarah felt both comforted and dubious. She told him she appreciated his devotion, but asked if it would really be possible for him to put the business aside until she fully recovered. His face paled slightly, as though she'd asked him to forfeit his entire fortune. "Of course," he answered, though his voice was hesitant. "I'll manage somehow." He never truly convinced her, and as the days stretched on, James's phone calls came more frequently. Text messages, frantic emails, and hushed conversations outside the hospital room replaced the quiet devotion she longed for. The tension in Sarah's chest expanded, pressing against her lungs in tandem with her rising blood pressure. By the end of the 3rd day of her hospital stay, Sarah made the decision. She would fake a coma, a medically induced sedation, so she could watch James's behavior without him realizing she was conscious. To orchestrate such a scheme, Sarah needed help. she found an unlikely ally in Dr. Rosen's head nurse, Barbara Mahoney, a compassionate yet pragmatic nurse with years of experience. Barbara was initially appalled at Sarah's request, reminding her that unnecessary sedation could pose risks to both her and the baby. Sarah pleaded, explaining her emotional turmoil, her fear about James's true loyalties, and the fact that her mental health was suffering. She wanted to time it carefully so that it wouldn't directly harm the baby. Nurse Barbara was reluctant, but eventually she agreed to help by minimizing sedation while using non-toxic solutions that would render Sarah in a near catatonic state for short periods of time, enough to fool James, but not enough to endanger her health or the baby's. Dr. Rosen, for ethical and professional reasons, remained unaware of the complete plan. He did believe Sarah might need mild sedation to cope with skyrocketing blood pressure, but he didn't know she was faking her total lack of consciousness. Nurse Barbara, who had seen many families wither under high-stress medical conditions, could empathize with Sarah's desire to know the truth. Her heart told her she was crossing a professional line, but her compassion for Sarah's plight won out, so the stage was set. With the help of carefully monitored IV drips, Sarah's body appeared unresponsive and deeply sedated. She trained herself to keep her eyes shut, resisting every urge to flinch or move when an itch begged to be scratched, or when tears threatened to leak out at the sound of heartbreak. She was now an observer in her own hospital room, a silent witness to James's every action and word. The first day James came to see her in this condition, Sarah was already mid-sedation. He rushed into the room, breathless, clearly shaken by her decline. She felt the warmth of his hand against hers. She wished she could squeeze it back to let him know she was still there. But she remained still, letting the moment pass. She heard him beg for her to come back to him, to open her eyes and speak. Her mother tried to calm him, explaining that the doctors wanted Sarah to rest. Margaret, unaware of the ruse's intricacies, was under the impression that Sarah needed heavier sedation due to a dangerous spike in her blood pressure. That same evening, Sarah heard a phone ring in the hallway. Moments later, James's voice floated through the open door. "Yes, I can leave for Tokyo next Tuesday," he said. "I'll only be gone for 3 days." Her heart pounded. Was he planning to travel internationally, while his wife lay in a hospital bed fighting for her life? She fought the urge to open her eyes and confront him. Every ounce of her self-control was mustered to remain still, steady, and silent. When James returned to the room, Nurse Barbara told him that Sarah's condition was tenuous, that she needed minimal stress and constant monitoring. James assured the nurse he understood, but soon after he began making phone calls right in the corner of the hospital room, discussing business deals and investment strategies in hushed tones, as if Sarah couldn't hear him. Over the next few days, James visited sporadically, sometimes bringing flowers or gifts, often overshadowed by incessant phone calls, business crises, and urgent texts. He frequently excused himself to take these calls in the hallway. Sarah tried to rationalize, telling herself, "At least he's here physically." But the glimpses of disappointment in her mother's eyes confirmed Sra's deepest fears. Even the staff started to whisper about James's priorities. On the 5th day of Sarah's faux coma, a new visitor entered her hospital room. Sarah heard heels clacking on the polished floor, sharp, confident steps. A woman's voice, smooth and laced with a subtle accent, asked for James by name. Nurse Barbara calmly explained that James wasn't present at the moment and that visitors were limited to family. But the woman insisted she was family, or would be soon. Sarah's blood turned cold at those words. She listened intently, forcing herself not to react. The woman introduced herself as Natalia Ivanova, an associate from James's company, Cunningham and Company. According to Natalia, there was an urgent business matter requiring James's signature, and she was there to deliver some papers to him. Nurse Barbara politely asked her to wait outside. The tension in the room was palpable. Sarah couldn't see Natalia, but she heard her voice dripping with entitlement. An hour later, James arrived. Natalia must have been waiting for him, because she quickly followed him into Sarah's room. "James," she cooed, ignoring the presence of Sarah's sleeping form. "I've been waiting. We need to finalize that Tokyo deal." There was a brief silence, followed by the sound of papers rustling. Sarah's stomach churned. She could practically visualize them discussing business as though she were a mere inconvenience. Surely James would send her away, she thought. But he didn't. Instead, he apologized to Natalia for the inconvenience, explaining that the doctors wanted him near Sarah, but they'd have to be quick. Over the next 20 minutes, they discussed figures, contracts, and meeting schedules. Sarah lay there, unmoving, while James verbally signed off on the Tokyo trip. When Natalia finally left, she gave a quiet, ambiguous remark. "Take care, James. I'll be waiting," which hung in the air like a cryptic promise. That night, after the bustle of the day quieted down, Nurse Barbara approached Sarah with a look of deep sympathy. "I don't know what's going on, but that woman doesn't carry the aura of a simple business colleague. I'm sorry, Sarah. You need your rest, but I also know you needed to see this." Sarah's heart felt as if it had been crushed under the weight of a massive boulder. She wanted to scream, to fight, to cry, but for now, she remained locked in her self-made prison of silence. As the days dragged on, James showed up less frequently. Often he sent an assistant or one of his executives to check on Sarah's condition. When he did appear, he was more preoccupied than ever, always glancing at his watch or answering calls at her bedside. Occasionally, Sarah felt his gaze linger on her face, like he was searching for a sign she might wake. In these moments, she sensed genuine worry in his voice. He would whisper, "Come back to me, Sarah," and gently stroke her hair. Those fleeting moments left Sarah awash in conflicting emotions. Heartbreak from his neglect, but also longing for the man she had fallen in love with. She felt her unborn baby move inside her, and the movement reminded her that she was doing this not just for herself, but for the little life she carried. If James's dedication was so tenuous, now what would it be like once the baby was actually here? Her parents visited daily, offering solace, praying at her bedside. David, her brother, flew in from Chicago, torn between anger at James and fear for Sarah's health. James's parents, influential figures in New York society, visited only once, accompanied by a flurry of reporters who were shooed away at the hospital entrance. They expressed perfunctory concern for Sarah, apologized for James's hectic schedule, and assured the staff that the Cunningham family spared no expense for her treatment. Behind closed eyelids, Sarah seethed. It was one thing for James to be busy, but for his entire family to treat her condition like a PR exercise made her feel like a prop, not a beloved member of their clan. Days turned into a week, then nearly 2. James still had not cancelled the Tokyo trip. Sarah heard enough snippets of conversation to piece together that he planned to leave in a few days while his wife was still comatose. She felt the first real stirrings of anger morphing into resolve. She began to question whether continuing the ruse was worth the mental anguish. Perhaps she already had her answer. James's priorities lay elsewhere, not by his wife's bedside. And yet some part of her clung to hope, waiting for a miracle that might prove she was wrong. On the morning James was scheduled to fly to Tokyo, Nurse Barbara discreetly informed Sarah that James had already left for the airport. The heartbreak was immense, like an earthquake shaking her very core. She'd truly hoped he might choose her over this business deal at the last minute. But no. Silence and a hollow space where he once stood. That afternoon, Natalia Ivanova reappeared. This time she was on the phone with someone speaking in a tone that suggested intimacy. "Yes, James," she said. "I'll see you tonight at the Ritz-Carlton in Tokyo. Everything's arranged." She ended the call with a gentle laugh. Then, in an unexpected move, Natalia spoke softly into the void of Sarah's hospital room. "Don't worry, Mrs. Cunningham. I'll take care of James while you're away." She placed a small envelope on a nearby table and left her heels clacking ominously down the corridor. Sarah felt the world around her tilt. 1,000 questions battered her mind. Was Natalia implying an affair, or was it just business? The envelope Natalia left on the table seemed to mock her incapacitated state. Sarah had to see it. Summoning all her courage, she decided to break her act. That evening, when the room was empty, except for Nurse Barbara, she opened her eyes. Barbara nearly jumped out of her skin. "What on earth?" Barbara whispered, pressing a hand to her mouth. Sarah apologized, but insisted she needed that envelope. Cautiously, Barbara handed it to her. Inside was a single piece of paper, some kind of schedule or itinerary for James's Tokyo trip. There were personal notes, scrawled in his own handwriting, dinner reservations, a spa booking for 2 and a private luxury cruise. At the bottom, a small heart was doodled next to Natalia's initials. Sarah's breath hitched. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring her vision. She wanted to scream, to sob, to tear the paper apart. Instead, she handed it back to Barbara with shaking hands. Any lingering doubts had now evaporated. Her husband was not just a man who prioritized business over her. He was possibly sharing romantic escapades with another woman, while she lay in a hospital bed, nearly 8 months pregnant. Nurse Barbara pleaded with Sarah to remain calm, lest her blood pressure spike and endanger her pregnancy. Sarah nodded numbly, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. She wanted to wake up from this nightmare, to return to the blissful days when she believed James was her devoted partner. That night, Sarah confided everything to Nurse Barbara, her insecurities, her plan to fake a coma, and the heartbreak of discovering James's potential affair. Barbara, moved to tears herself, urged Sarah to think of her unborn child first. Stress, heartbreak, anger, none of it was beneficial for the baby. Sarah wrestled with her next move. Should she confront James, exposing her ruse and demanding answers? Or should she bide her time, gather more evidence, and plan for the future of her child without James? She thought about her parents, how they had worked multiple jobs, but always made time to sit down for a family dinner, to talk, to truly be present. That's what she wanted for her child. Not lavish wealth and absent parents. At dawn, Sarah slipped back into her comatose performance. She would remain in this state until James returned from Tokyo. Then she'd decide her next step. Nurse Barbara, now fully complicit, promised to keep her safe and informed. During the week James was gone, Sarah endured visits from well-meaning hospital staff and distant acquaintances bearing fruit baskets and get-well-soon cards. A few times reporters tried to sneak in, lured by the scandalous possibility of the pregnant Mrs. Cunningham's deteriorating health. Security escorted them out. Sarah's mother never left her side, reading her stories of strong, independent women who overcame adversity. Margaret had no idea Sarah was conscious, but her soft voice and comforting presence provided a sliver of hope in Sarah's despair. James finally returned to New York with Natalia in tow. The day after their plane landed, James showed up at the hospital. Sarah heard his footsteps, recognized his voice, and picked up on a hint of guilt laced through his tone. He informed the medical staff that he'd completed vital negotiations in Tokyo, and that now he would focus entirely on Sarah's recovery. Natalia was not with him in the room this time, but Sarah's mind conjured vivid images of the two of them in Tokyo's finest restaurants and hotel suites. She shuddered internally, fighting the urge to lash out. The next few days saw James park himself at the hospital, occasionally stepping out for phone calls. He appeared remorseful, perhaps sensing how precarious Sarah's condition was. "I love you," he whispered into her ear one evening when he believed she was unconscious. "I promise to do better. Please come back to me. I can't lose you." Sarah's heart twisted in turmoil. Did he truly regret his actions? Or was this just another performance, a guilt-driven show he put on, because he feared public scrutiny? On the third day of James's return, Dr. Rosen approached him with guarded optimism. "She's been stable," Dr. Rosen noted, "and I think we may try reducing her sedation to see if she regains consciousness." James's eyes brightened. "Do it," he urged. "I need my wife back." Sarah overheard everything. She knew the moment of reckoning was near. That evening, Nurse Barbara administered a smaller dose of sedatives, just enough to keep up the pretense while Dr. Rosen did his routine checks. When James left for a business call, Barbara whispered to Sarah, "He wants you conscious, ironically. This is your chance. Are you ready?" Sarah nodded minutely, her heart pounding. The day she'd confront her husband and the father of her child was close at hand. When morning light spilled into the hospital room, Dr. Rosen declared it was time to bring Sarah out of sedation gradually. Sarah pretended to stir groggily, fluttering her eyelids and letting out a soft moan. James leapt from his chair and seized her hand, tears glistening in his eyes. "Sarah, can you hear me?" he asked, voice trembling. Slowly, Sarah let her gaze settle on him, feigning confusion as if emerging from a dream. Dr. Rosen and the nurses played their parts, checking her vitals, applauding her progress. Margaret, Philip, and David crowded into the room, crying tears of joy. Sarah felt a pang of guilt for having deceived them all, but it was overshadowed by her swirling emotions regarding James. Over the next few days, she played the role of an amnesiac patient, claiming she remembered collapsing, but nothing about her time in the hospital. James seized this chance to rewrite history. "I've been here by your side every day," he claimed. "I flew to Tokyo only for a crucial meeting, but I rushed back the moment I could." Sarah nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. He's lying, yet so confident in his lie. She wondered if there was any trace of shame in his heart for what he had done. Nurse Barbara remained close, giving Sarah understanding looks. Sometimes Barbara murmured that Sarah should reveal the truth, but Sarah wanted more time to see if James would confess on his own. Hope is a stubborn creature, she thought bitterly. One evening, after her family had gone home, Sarah and James were alone in the hospital room. He sat by her side, gently stroking her hair. She noticed how tired he looked, circles under his eyes, a slump in his posture. He opened up about a series of stressful deals, the Tokyo trip, and how terrified he was when she slipped into a coma. "That's all in the past now," he said, gazing into her eyes. "We should look forward to the baby and our future. I swear I'll do better." Sarah's heart pounded. She took a shaky breath. "James," she said softly, "is there anything else you want to tell me?" "About Tokyo, Or maybe Natalia. He blinked, a flash of panic flickering across his features before he recovered. Natalia. She's just a business associate. Why would I have anything else to say about her? His tone was composed, but Sarah noticed the slight trembling in his hand. She inhaled again, mustering courage. Because I overheard some things while I was asleep, she said, carefully, choosing her words to suggest partial awareness. His eyes widened. Things that made me think you and Natalia were closer than just business associates. James swallowed hard. Sarah, you were unconscious. You might have misheard or misunderstood. Stop, she interrupted, her voice quivering. I'm tired of lies, James. I deserve to know the truth. He rose from his chair, pacing. I won't deny we grew close while working together. But it's not what you think. You were so ill and I had all this pressure on my shoulders. Natalia was there to help with the deals. Yes, we had dinner. We traveled. But that was all for business. Sarah's pulse raced. She sensed half-truths swirling in the air. But she wanted him to either come clean or entangle himself in more lies. She pressed further. What about the spa reservations? The private cruise for 2. The heart next to Natalia's initials. Each word was like a dagger thrown at him. James stopped pacing. He stared at her, mouth agape. How do you know about that? In the hush that followed, Sarah decided it was time for her final card. She confessed everything that she had been aware during her coma, that she'd orchestrated the sedation, and that Nurse Barbara had helped her. She detailed the heartache of hearing his phone calls, the Tokyo trip, and Natalia's visits. By the time she finished, tears streamed down her cheeks. James looked at her in horror, disbelief, and then anger. You faked a coma, he hissed. You manipulated everyone, your mother, your father, the doctors and me, just to spy on me. Sarah's voice trembled. I had to know if you truly loved me and our child, or if your business and other women were your real priorities. His face contorted a mixture of guilt and fury. What I did was misguided, he spat. But how could you do something so extreme, so calculated? Did you ever think of how I'd feel believing I might lose you? They glared at each other, an abyss of betrayal between them. Sarah felt her heart splitting in 2. The confrontation had laid bare their darkest secrets, but the outcome was far from resolution. The hospital monitors beeped incessantly in the tense silence, echoing the fragile state of their marriage. In the days that followed, the Cunningham family learned bits and pieces of the fiasco. Whispers spread that Sarah had been secretly conscious, possibly eavesdropping on James's confessions. The staff at Mount Sinai, though discreet, couldn't fully hide their shock. James moved out of the hospital room, renting a penthouse suite at the plaza for the remainder of Sarah's stay. He cited the need for space to think. Sarah, in turn, felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. Her child was due in only a few weeks, and her husband was absent, entangled in a web of secrets and resentments. Her parents, unaware of the full truth, pressed her gently for answers. She gave them a watered-down version, that she'd been conscious earlier than they realized, and that she'd uncovered James's potential affair. Margaret wept quietly, horrified, that her daughter, who had grown up in a small, loving household, now faced the prospect of raising a child in a fractured family. Philip tried to remain diplomatic, urging Sarah to seek counseling with James, to not make hasty decisions. But Sarah felt a raw wound too fresh to mend with a simple apology or therapy session. Nurse Barbara worried incessantly about Sarah's stress levels. Dr. Rosen ramped up his monitoring, concerned about the baby's health. Sarah, lying in bed at night, often stared at the city lights twinkling outside her window. She imagined a parallel life in which James had stepped away from business the moment she fell ill, stayed by her side, devoted himself to her and the unborn child. In that parallel world, their marriage thrived, blossoming under adversity. But in reality, she had the twisted story of an absentee husband and an unscrupulous business associate who left no doubt about James's priorities. One stormy evening, thunder rolling over Manhattan, James returned to Sarah's hospital room unannounced. She was startled by his presence, noticing the dark circles under his eyes, the disheveled hair as though he hadn't slept in days. He sank into the chair beside her bed. For a moment, he said nothing, his expression a blend of remorse and exhaustion. Finally, he spoke in a hoarse voice. "Natalia and we did have an affair. It started before your coma. It was just once, I swear, and I regretted it the moment it happened. But when you got sick, I panicked. My business was in crisis. My personal life was unraveling, and I just made the worst decisions of my life." Sarah felt her throat tighten. Tears brimmed in her eyes. She'd suspected as much, but hearing him say it shattered the last vestiges of hope she'd nurtured. "Why tell me this now?" she whispered. He reached for her hand, but she recoiled. Undeterred, he kept his gaze on her. "Because I can't bear to keep lying. I know I messed up. I can't undo what I did, but I want to be honest moving forward. I made a vow to be there for you, to love you, and I failed. I've never felt more ashamed." Sarah sniffled, looking away. Outside, the rain pounded against the windows, mirroring the tempest in her heart. "And what do you expect me to say?" she asked, voice thick with emotion. James pressed his lips together. "I don't expect forgiveness, not now. But I need you to know that I choose you and our baby over everything else. I've already asked Natalia to transfer to our London branch. I want to cut off all ties. No more traveling, no more deals that take me away from you. I'll step down if that's what it takes. I want a chance to fix us." She closed her eyes. The pain was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. "I'm not sure you can fix what's broken," she said softly. "It's not just your affair, James. It's the fact that you were never truly here, that I felt alone even in your presence." They sat in silence for a long moment. James finally rose. "I understand," he murmured. "I'll give you space. But please, please know I'm not giving up on us." As he left, Sarah felt both grief and an unexpected flicker of relief. At least the truth was out, no longer festering under layers of deceit. Only 1 week later, Sarah went into labor. It was a harrowing experience. Her blood pressure spiked dangerously, forcing an emergency C-section. In the operating room, under the bright surgical lights, Sarah trembled with fear, clutching Nurse Barbara's hand. She didn't know if James would come. She hadn't spoken to him since his confession. But as the anesthesiologist prepared her for the procedure, James burst into the operating suite, clad in scrubs. His face was a mask of frantic worry. "I'm here," he whispered, taking her hand from Barbara. She let him hold it, too overwhelmed to protest. The surgery lasted longer than expected. Sarah's condition was complicated by her blood pressure, and at one point, she drifted into unconsciousness. When she awoke, she heard a baby crying, strong, vibrant cries that filled her with awe. Through bleary eyes, she saw James cradling a tiny bundle, tears coursing down his cheeks. "It's a boy," he said, voice thick with emotion. "He's healthy, and you're going to be okay." Sarah mustered a faint smile, relief washing over her. For a moment, she allowed herself to revel in this pure joy. Their child was here, alive and strong. Whatever ugliness lay between them, this baby represented a new beginning, though whether that beginning included James remained uncertain. In the days following the birth, Sarah recovered slowly, regaining her strength. She named the baby William Philip Cunningham, honoring her father. James was present, ensuring the best pediatric care, insisting on top-of-the-line everything. He hovered near Sarah, ever attentive, as though trying to atone for his absence during her pregnancy. When they brought William home to the penthouse, an air of unease colored every interaction. The nursery, decorated in pale blues and whites, felt both cozy and strange cozy because it was meticulously designed. Strange because Sarah had often imagined this moment under vastly different circumstances. James tried to assist with feedings, diaper changes, and midnight rocking sessions. He was clumsy at first, but sincere in his efforts, looking at William with an adoration that made Sarah's heart ache. Could a man who so clearly loved his son ever be the uncaring monster she feared he was? Meanwhile, the public eye scrutinized their every move. Tabloids speculated about the new heir to the Cunningham fortune, about Sarah's difficult pregnancy, and even about rumors of James's affair. The family PR machine went into overdrive, releasing statements of joy over the newborn, and praising James for his unwavering support of his wife. Sarah saw these statements and wanted to tear them to pieces. The hypocrisy stung. 3 weeks postpartum, Sarah could no longer hold back her resentment. William was napping, and James had just returned from a brief meeting. They stood in the living room, tension pulsing between them. "I appreciate what you've done for William," Sarah said, her voice unsteady. "But what about us? Do you really think we can pretend everything is fine?" James frowned, stepping closer to her. "I'm not pretending. I'm trying to be a good father and husband," she scoffed, tears building. "A good husband doesn't cheat on his pregnant wife or abandon her in the hospital." Her words dripped with bitterness. "I feel like a fool for having tested you, and I feel even more foolish that I discovered you were failing me anyway." His gaze dropped to the floor. "I know. I'm sorry." He reached out to touch her, but she flinched. "I'm offering to step away from the business if that's what you want. I've already made arrangements for a senior partner to take the reins. I want to focus on you and William." Sarah's chest tightened. A part of her wished for this moment for him to finally choose her over work. Yet the betrayal and pain still loomed large. She thought of the lonely nights, the mocking presence of Natalia, and the humiliating knowledge that he'd chosen money and lust over his pregnant wife. "I don't know if it's enough," she whispered, voice trembling. James's shoulders sagged, defeat etched across his features. "I understand. I need you to see that I'm sincere. Whatever it takes, I'll do it. I only ask for time, a chance to prove it." Reluctantly, Sarah agreed to counseling. They sought out Dr. Marie Lawrence, a well-respected therapist who had worked with high-profile couples in Manhattan. During their sessions, Sarah aired her grievances, the emotional abandonment, the affair, the sense that money was James's only true love. James confessed to feeling overwhelmed by his family's expectations and the pressure of inheriting a massive legacy. He admitted that his fear of failing had driven him to bury himself in work. Each session was a battlefield of emotions. Sometimes they ended with hope, other times with Sarah storming out in tears. Dr. Lawrence encouraged them to start small, to rebuild trust through actions, not just words. She also urged them to consider what environment they wanted for William. Would they show him a broken home, overshadowed by bitterness, or attempt to forge a partnership grounded in forgiveness and respect? As the weeks wore on, Sarah noticed small changes in James's behavior. He turned off his phone during therapy, setting it on silent and focusing solely on her. He cancelled business trips instead, attending William's pediatric appointments and bedtime stories. It was awkward, as though he was learning a new language, but Sarah recognized the earnestness. Still, the memory of Natalia, the business deals, and that envelope gnawed at her. Could trust be rebuilt from such utter betrayal? She wasn't sure. Yet for William's sake, she found herself wanting to try. Holidays approached, and the Cunningham family extended invitations to lavish Thanksgiving and Christmas gatherings. Sarah felt a visceral reluctance to attend, associating them with the side of James's life that had overshadowed their marriage. But James insisted, hoping it might help re-establish their bond with the family. He argued that if they presented a united front, it would quell media speculation and allow them some semblance of normalcy. Sarah had no interest in enabling a public relations facade, but she agreed to go, if only to see whether the Cunninghams recognized and respected the gravity of their situation. At the Thanksgiving dinner, held in the Cunningham ancestral home in upstate New York, Sarah found herself surrounded by opulent settings, gold-rimmed dinnerware, century-old wine from the family cellar, and stilted conversations about business expansions. William was admired from a distance by family members, who exclaimed how wonderful it was to have another Cunningham heir. During the meal, James's mother, Clarissa, tried to engage Sarah in polite chatter. "My dear, you look radiant," she cooed, ignoring the tension that everyone else seemed to tiptoe around. "James has told us about your counseling sessions. That's so progressive of you two." Sarah forced a polite smile, biting her tongue to keep from retorting. Later that evening, as they drove back to Manhattan, Sarah broke the silence. "Your family behaves like everything is perfect, that there was never any scandal. Does it bother you they're acting like I'm just a decorative piece again?" James glanced at her sorrow flickering in his eyes. "Yes. But that's how they are, gloss over problems with politeness and glamour. I'm sorry. I know it's not what you're used to." She turned to look out the window, stroking William's tiny head as he dozed in his car seat. "I just want truth, James. No more illusions." Over the next 2 months, Sarah noticed that James appeared more committed than ever to the family. He delegated most of his business duties, spent mornings feeding William, and even accompanied Sarah to postpartum checkups. At times they shared quiet, tender moments, a far cry from the storm of betrayal. They also continued therapy, which remained challenging, but occasionally yielded breakthroughs. One night, after putting William to sleep, they sat in the living room, the lights dim. Sarah sipped tea, while James nursed a glass of bourbon. The tension between them had softened, somewhat replaced by a cautious camaraderie. She felt comfortable enough to ask, "Do you miss it? The meetings, the deals being at the center of everything." He gazed into the amber liquid in his glass. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I realized that when you were in the hospital and I had to manage everything alone, it wasn't worth losing you. The cost was too high." Sarah nodded, her heart stirring with a complex mixture of affection and guardedness. She admitted to herself that she still loved James. That love never vanished. It had simply been buried under layers of betrayal and anger. Yet forging a path forward required trust, and trust was earned slowly. Just as Sarah was beginning to believe a fragile peace was possible, an old ghost resurfaced. Natalia emailed James, stating she was pregnant. The message arrived on James's personal account late one evening. He was in the shower when his phone buzzed, and Sarah, hearing the notification, couldn't resist a glance. She froze when she saw Natalia's name in the subject line. With shaky fingers, she read the email. James, I didn't know how else to tell you. I'm pregnant. It might be yours. We need to talk. The words blurred before her eyes. She felt the air squeezed from her lungs, replaced by a surge of panic rage and heartbreak. She confronted James the instant he stepped out of the shower, hair still dripping. Holding up his phone, she demanded answers. His eyes widened in shock as he read Natalia's message. Sarah, I swear I have no idea about this. She never said anything before. He scrambled to rationalize, stammering that Natalia was likely bluffing or trying to manipulate him. But Sarah's face twisted in anguish. Is there even a chance it's yours? She asked, voice cracking. When he didn't answer immediately, her worst fears were confirmed. A renewed wave of betrayal crashed over her. In that moment, something inside Sarah snapped. She rushed to the bedroom, shoving clothes and essentials into a suitcase. James followed, pleading. Sarah, don't go. We can figure this out. She spun around, eyes blazing. Figure out what? That you've possibly fathered another child while I was pregnant with our son. That I faked a coma to see if you cared, only to discover you were sleeping with someone else. She let out a bitter laugh that turned into a sob. He attempted to embrace her, but she shoved him away. Stay back, she hissed. I'm leaving. I need to protect William from this madness. We'll talk once you've sorted out your mess. And with that, she grabbed the baby, left the penthouse, and called a taxi. Standing in the cold lobby, tears streaming down her face, she cradled William's tiny body against her chest, whispering, I'm sorry, my sweet boy. I'm so sorry. Sarah sought refuge in her parents' modest home in Buffalo. They welcomed her with open arms, dismayed, but not entirely surprised by the turn of events. David flew in from Chicago for moral support, helping her settle back into her childhood room. The pastel walls and handmade quilts felt like a safe harbor in a storm. James called every day, leaving voicemails that ranged from begging for her return to cursing Natalia for what he believed was a lie. Sarah listened, but never answered. She needed clarity, and staying away from James was the only way she could think. Her heartbreak was too raw, the future too uncertain. Despite the pain, Sarah found solace in William, who continued to flourish. In his innocent eyes, she saw a reason to keep going. She resumed therapy sessions via video calls, confiding her turmoil to Dr. Lawrence. The therapist, though sympathetic, couldn't provide concrete answers about James's sincerity. Only you can decide if this relationship is worth salvaging, Dr. Lawrence told her. But remember, you and James have a child together. His well-being is paramount. A month after Sarah left, James sent her a text. Natalia's child isn't mine. DNA test proved it. Please come home. She stared at the message, heart pounding. She wanted to believe it was true. But trust was a fragile creature. She called him for the first time since she left. Sarah, he said, voice cracking with emotion, I'll send you the report. I had no choice but to give her what she wanted to prove paternity. It's negative. She was trying to manipulate me into returning to her or paying her off. Please, Sarah, come back. Let's move past this. Her shoulders shook with sobs as she listened. Relief flooded her, mingled with a dull ache of resentment. Even if Natalia's baby wasn't his, the fact remained that James's betrayal had ripped their marriage to shreds. She agreed to see him, but insisted on meeting at her parents' place in Buffalo, where she felt safe. James arrived in Buffalo desperate to make amends. On the porch of her parents' home, Sarah held William and listened in silence. James pleaded for another chance, vowing to resign from his company and focus solely on their family. Sarah's heart ached, torn between anger and the hope he might truly change. "I've given you chances," she said, voice trembling. "But this time there are conditions, therapy boundaries, and no second slip." James nodded, tears in his eyes. "Anything." As William cooed softly in her arms, Sarah whispered, "This is your last chance. Don't waste it." In the quiet of Buffalo, Sarah and James began to rebuild. He rented a small apartment nearby, attending therapy and joining her family's simple life. Walks in the park with William became their healing ritual. James showed change, less obsessed with status, more present. One starlit evening, Sarah asked, "Do you miss your old life?" He took her hand. "Not if it means losing you." Her heart softened. They weren't healed, but they were trying. Slowly, painfully, trust began to flicker again. In that backyard, beneath the stars, they found the fragile beginning of something worth saving. As dawn breaks over a new chapter in Sarah and James's life, they find themselves cautiously optimistic. Their marriage is far from perfect, scarred by the lies, betrayal, and that daring Coma ruse. Yet amid the wreckage, they've discovered a spark, a small flame of possibility that with genuine effort and time might grow into the love they once believed in. Their journey stands as a testament. No relationship is without trials, especially one tested by wealth, ambition, and hidden secrets. In the end, it's the willingness to confront the darkest truths and take responsibility that can pave the way to a stronger bond. Before you go, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more dramatic and heart-wrenching stories. Reminders that real life can be more complicated, more devastating, and sometimes more hopeful than fiction. Thank you for watching.